Well, three federal judges in El Paso have ruled Texas cannot use the congressional maps the state legislature drew this year.
The ruling is a big blow to an effort by Republicans to preserve a majority in the House. Well, joining us right now to discuss this is Rice University political science professor Mark Jones. So, Mark, these maps appear to give the GOP 5 additional seats. Where could the court battle go next?
Well, the court battle goes right now to the U.S. Supreme Court. So normally it would go through the circuit court, the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans. But because of the nature of this case, it goes directly in an emergency manner to the U.S. Supreme Court that has different options. They can effectively uphold the decision by this 3-judge panel and require Texas to use the current districts, those that are presently in place. It can effectively overturn the decision by the 3-judge panel, and under that we would use the maps that were redrawn this summer for the March 2026 elections. Or it could sort of adopt a middle option where it says we're not going to rule on the merits of the case, but because this decision came so late during the filing period, we're going to allow the maps that were drawn in the summer to be used for the March primaries. In essence, it's a very confusing scenario where really nobody knows what's going to happen, but the Supreme Court is likely to resolve this issue one way or another relatively soon.
Well, Mark, there is one other state that we can look to for a similar situation, but it's just reversed. Voters in California did approve a proposition that would give Democrats 5 additional seats in California, but Prop 50 is also facing a court challenge as well.
Right, but unlike the Texas maps, where because the Trump administration Department of Justice mentioned the issue of race, as did the governor when he called the special session, that's not the case out in California, meaning that those maps are on stronger legal ground. So while it's possible that the Texas maps will survive from the summer and go in force for the March 26 primary and November 2026 election, there's a greater probability that the California maps will remain. So we could find ourselves in the very unique scenario where the Texas maps, which were the reason why California redrew its maps, are effectively erased, thereby nullifying the Republican advantage in Texas. But at the same time, Democrats gained 3 to 5 seats out in California because of that redistricting. So after all the efforts of President Trump, he could find himself in a situation where this blew up in his face and we ended up with a Democratic advantage for mid-decade redistricting, not a Republican that was as was intended. But that, of course, will depend on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court quite easily could say that the maps drawn this summer should be those that Texas uses in March, in which case the president would have back his advantage here in Texas, and the redistricting gambit would at least pay off with a net gain of Republican seats nationwide.
Well, Mark, Missouri and North Carolina also drew new maps in favor of Republicans. So would those maps hold up?
Those are also being challenged, but I think because they did not use the language related to race based on the Department of Justice memo like Texas did, they're more likely to withstand legal scrutiny than is the Texas maps, which really the Trump administration in particular, and to a lesser extent Texas Republicans, undermine their own maps by injecting race early on to the discussion. Later on, they tried to backtrack, but they couldn't really close the door because they had made those statements back in the spring, and those statements were used against them in the proceedings out in El Paso. And the 3-judge panel found those proceedings to be, or those statements to be somewhat damning in the sense that based on what Governor Abbott and other Republicans said very early on in the process, stemming from that DOJ memo related to coalition districts and the use of race, the judges construed that race did play a factor in the construction of these districts, even if the map maker himself, Adam Kincaid from up in Northern Virginia, says he did not utilize race.
All right, Mark Jones with Rice University, thanks so much for putting it in terms that the audience can understand and grasp. There's a lot going on here. It can feel a bit overwhelming, but you always make it so simple. Thank you.
Thank you.